Okay, so continuing the discussion from last week, I want to talk more about what it means to be eating a pro-metabolic diet. What does it look like throughout the day? Why does it matter? And how you can implement some changes into your current diet to really boost your thyroid and liver function so that you're creating more energy and feeling better throughout the day. So, I'll be discussing a little bit about what it really means. So, really, when I talk about pro-metabolic nutrition, I'm really talking about how can we really support the activity of the cell. Again, the metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions in the body. How can we make sure that is happening rhythmically, in a relaxed, easy kind of way where the cells naturally do what they know how to do and they have the building blocks to do so. So, in terms of eating to signal safety, it's really reducing stress from every possible level. You know, life is stressful enough, and we want to find ways to really signal to the body that it has resources, that it has fuel, that it has micronutrients, macronutrients, and then can do exactly what it wants to do. So it's not only the easily digestible foods, but really eating foods that make it so that your blood sugar is balanced, because this is a separate video, but at a high level, when your blood sugar is balanced, your liver has what it needs to provide the rest of the body with what they need to function properly, and therefore steering the body away from that kind of stress hormone state where all of a sudden it gets a signal maybe that it's running out of glucose, so it's going to send that surge of adrenaline and that surge of that surge of cortisol in order to pull in the glycogen out of the muscles. That is anti-metabolic from this standpoint. So aside from eating balanced meals frequently throughout the day, and I'm talking more like every 2 to 3 hours really, because someone with a very slow metabolic rate or just a hypothyroid type state, which is most people these days, someone in that kind of compromised metabolic state, their liver is already struggling to store enough glycogen. So by providing it throughout the day, we're basically giving our liver a hug and really giving it this kind of extra boost to be successful. So again, looking more into what a pro-metabolic diet looks like, we are really focusing on anti-inflammatory foods because we want to limit stress. We want to signal safety. We want to signal to the body that it has what it needs. So I am such a fan of muscle meat. Everyone knows that, going back to my tiger days, but I am really a fan of anti-inflammatory proteins, and I'm thinking about amino acids like proline, glycine, and glutamine that really help support the gut lining and therefore support the immune system that is housed in our gut. And in terms of easily digestible sources of these, I love the idea of really incorporating bone broths. That's amazing. Scallops are really high in glycine. I'm thinking broths, grass-fed dairy. Eggs are amazing because not only do they provide cholesterol and choline and all of these fat-soluble vitamins like D, E, and K, but the protein in an egg is almost 100%, or some would say 100% usable, which is so much greater than something like a plant-based source of protein that may not be as utilizable by the body. So another aspect of pro-metabolic eating is, again, balancing the blood sugar and reducing the surge of stress hormones. That means eating when you wake up. So within 30 to 60 minutes of rising, that's likely when cortisol is going to be the highest. It follows a curve throughout the day and it spikes in the morning. That's sort of what wakes us up. The longer we're in darkness, the longer we're sleeping, the more that cortisol is starting to creep up. And a lot of hypothyroid people wake up with extreme levels of adrenaline. That tends to be comorbid with people that are, again, in a metabolically reduced state. But we can signal safety by lowering adrenaline. Even just having a little bit of salt and something sweet can completely transform the terrain of chemicals in the body rather quickly. So if you're not hungry when you wake up, again, that can be a sign of metabolic suppression, but having, anywhere about 4 ounces of OJ with a little bit of salt sprinkled in can really start to send signals of repair into the body. So eating 6 times a day might feel like a lot for people, but in terms of healing a body that has been very metabolically suppressed, it can be such a game changer. And it might be easier to get those kind of nutrient density, smaller meals in throughout the day when you just know and can feel the difference of what it feels like to be calm and to feel nourished and to feel like you're actually digesting what you're eating, as opposed to maybe more of the intermittent fasting type of eating schedule where it's 1 meal a day, 2,000 to 3,000 calories. That is can be a little bit taxing on the liver, especially in terms of having to mobilize enough bile to break down all of that fat. So again, another video. And I'd say the last point for what it means to have a pro-metabolic diet, on top of eating regularly, eating nutrient-dense, easily digestible, anti-inflammatory foods, and balancing those carbs and proteins, and really in ways that work for you. But it's really about balancing the minerals, because, potassium and calcium and sodium and magnesium, I'm always talking about magnesium, these regulate how the cell is taking in the nourishment and really, again, is dictating that metabolic rate. If the cell is able to utilize what you're giving it, we'll notice the pulse going up and we'll notice the temperature going up. Both signs that the metabolic activity is kicking into gear and the cell is sort of buzzing and happy because it has what it needs to do what it wants to do. Again, we're going for safety. We're going to find a way to eat to really reduce stress. There are so many different stressors in our environment, whether it's what we're thinking, random things we're eating, what we're breathing in, what's going on politically, what's gone on in lives before we were even born, what has maybe happened to us when we were in the womb, what happened to us when we were, very young. All of these things add up to create pro-inflammatory states in the body. And we're trying to turn that back so that we can feel good and live a life that feels good. So back to actionable steps here. I like to think about other, really commonplace foods that we're eating or drinking throughout the day that might be having a pro-metabolic or a anti-metabolic effect. So coffee. Everyone really likes to talk about coffee. It's such a big part of our culture. And I think it has a really bad reputation, especially in the wellness world of, you got to cut out coffee and, stay away from that. It's bad for your sleep. It's bad for stress. But when people are having negative reactions to coffee, it mostly indicates a couple of things, but it's indicating maybe that their blood sugar balance is not as robust as it could be, likely due to an overburdened liver, likely due to an overload of stressors, perhaps even nutrient deficiencies, that they drink a cup of coffee and all of a sudden they're flooded with stress hormones and they feel it. They feel jittery and then they get the crash. But in that case, yes, coffee is having a very anti-metabolic effect, because by flooding the body with stress hormones, that's putting work for the liver to do, which means less time to really work on that thyroid conversion, which happens mostly in the liver. So how can we make coffee a more pro-metabolic, magnesium, B vitamin, manganese rich drink? It's really drinking it either after a meal or with enough cream and, maple, honey, whatever is palatable to you, so that it's not triggering that stress response, but instead having a kind of pro-metabolic effect where the thyroid conversion can happen more smoothly. And even just the bitter compounds in coffee are really wonderful in terms of supporting that bile flow and increasing liver function in general when we think about the antioxidants that are in coffee. So think twice before taking coffee out of the picture, especially if you have a history of liver disorder or, any kind of imbalance in terms of blood sugar and liver function in general. It might be a good time to really zoom in on how can we support this liver on top of fueling it, but really thinking about these sort of magical compounds that are in coffee that could be very supportive to you. So 2 other teas, or I should say 3 other teas that are really amazing for supporting the metabolism are nettle tea, I think it's a wonderful source of magnesium. It's a great way to really boost those magnesium levels. And magnesium is necessary for proper liver function. It's responsible for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. And it seems to be inversely related to the level of stress. The more stress we have in our body, the more we're burning through our magnesium, which is known as the magnesium burn rate. And we need what seems to be about 5 milligrams per pound of body weight of magnesium, which most people are not even getting close to in, the standard diet, but even, a really balanced diet. It's difficult to get the same levels of magnesium that we used to get because our soils are so depleted and it's just not in the food supply anymore. But when we can create these very highly absorbable forms of magnesium by steeping things like nettle leaves in a tea, you can really boost that and really give your liver some support in terms of getting back to normal functioning and mitigating the effects of high stress, high cortisol, high adrenaline, and all of the cascades of stress that happen when we're under stress and in our lives. So other tea, ginger. Ginger is highly pro-metabolic because not only does it lower serotonin and the prostaglandins that are very inflammatory, but it's a prokinetic, which means it's speeding up the gut. And when we speed up the motility in the gut, that means less endotoxin, that means less serotonin production, that means less of a chance for things to leak out into the bloodstream, causing those cascades of more stress, more inflammation, all of the issues that happen when protein molecules are leaking out into the bloodstream, when viruses are leaking out into the bloodstream, when parasites are leaking out into the bloodstream. We don't want that to happen. We want the gut to really follow this really wonderful contraction, kind of a rhythmic flow throughout the day. We want to speed up gut motility to make sure things are not sitting and fermenting within us. So again, ginger is amazing for that. And a lot of people find that even just drinking ginger tea can really regulate the bowels. So green tea and black tea, other favorites, if people are not so hyped on coffee and really want to experiment with other types of teas, green and black teas are sort of hit or miss. Green tea can be pro-thyroid in the sense that it lowers estrogen, which can really increase inflammation and overburden the liver, having to detoxify it and get it out of the body. But the fluoride in green tea can be anti-thyroid, so not the best in terms of the larger picture. And then black tea can be very estrogenic, raising blood levels of estrogen up to 19% higher in regular black tea drinkers. But again, the caffeine can be very therapeutic. So some people benefit from having black tea with a little bit of lemon to offset the estrogenic effects. So my final point in terms of pro-metabolic beverages will bring us to the area of milk consumption. And I know milk has sort of a bad reputation, especially in the wellness sphere. There's such a shift towards nut milks and all of these very anti-thyroid elixirs. But milk is wonderful. So when we think about the ideal environment of the cell, the calcium to phosphorus ratio is truly important because calcium can dictate the functioning and the kind of stress reductive ability of the cell. When it has enough calcium, we will see decreases in the parathyroid hormone, which means that we won't be leaching calcium from our bones and, really causing that stress reaction where we're pulling minerals from our bones and tissues because the body is reading that we don't have enough. And again, when we can lower stress from all possible areas, especially in terms of making sure the foods we're eating are balanced in terms of their minerals, that lowers the amount of mast cells being released, that lowers the histamine response in the body, that's going to lower serotonin production even further, which can lower prolactin. All of these are just indicators that the body is feeling resourced and doesn't feel the need to set off these cascades of stress. And again, the less stress cascades we're setting off, the more we can focus on repair, on liver function, on thyroid conversion, and the more we can feel better. So back to milk. It's a wonderful source of calcium. It's very calcium rich. And the cool thing about it is that the cow can filter out most of the anti-nutrients that are in a lot of plant-based sources of calcium. You know, people think about their leafy greens as being really magnesium rich and calcium rich, but so much of that is bound up within these very powerful anti-nutrient plant-based toxins that prevent the body from absorbing it. You know, it's not, a pile of spinach is not a very valuable source of nutrients because there's so much preventing us from really taking that into the system. But milk, it's as if the cow has packaged it up for us so that we have not only a balance of sugar in the form of lactose, but really highly bioavailable protein, a little bit of fat if you're having, 2% to whole milk, and an ample supply of vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins like K, D, E, A, and, all of those work synergistically to support the thyroid, to support the liver. And again, it's bringing the idea back to how can we lower stress on the system? How can we look at what it is that it means to be a human, looking at all of the possible sources of stress and finding ways to eat that can start to actually turn that back towards more of a stress reducing kind of environment where the cell can get back to its normal activities. And again, I know there's a lot of ideas about milk being inflammatory or allergenic, but it's likely that the milk isn't the problem. It's mostly your gut is probably the problem. If you can't digest lactose, that might be a sign that you have some kind of bacterial overgrowth, and it's therefore prevented the ability to produce lactase, so you're not breaking it down and it's causing a host of issues. Again, don't blame the milk, look at the gut, see what you can address from there. So to summarize this discussion, we want to eat to signal safety. We want to eat to really fuel the liver so that it can convert the inactive thyroid hormone to the active thyroid hormone, which will then dictate our production of energy, dictate our gut contractions and the production of enzymes. It will really dictate our utilization of all these wonderful minerals and fat-soluble vitamins. So again, the cells can get to work and really provide us with energy to feel good, to do what we want, to really create that state where we feel really energized and creative and playful and can interact with life in a way that feels very meaningful and deliberate. These are all signs of a very robust and well-functioning metabolism. And the more we can start to tweak and experiment and try out certain foods and certain ways of eating that really allow us to feel that, the better we feel throughout our day. So it really does come back to self-experimentation, but with a larger framework in mind. Really nutrient density, animal-based foods are amazing for that. It's almost like they filter it out for us. And really just thinking about your life in terms of balance, thinking about what is on your plate actually and how that's adding to your cell's ability to get back to work. So feel free to drop a comment below. Feel free to ask any questions. Again, I love talking about this. I get hyped up just talking about this, and I would love to dive in more if there's any areas that are feeling inspiring or confusing or just you want to hear more about. All right, take it easy.